Okay, perfect. All right, I'm here with Stepan and Orion from Squad. So thank you guys for joining us today. And we're here to talk about squads, of course, a bit of Fuse, but also the recent audits of squads before. So can you guys start by briefly introducing yourself and what you do at squads? Maybe Stepan first.
Sure. My name is Stepan. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Squad Labs. I do a lot of different things, but mostly focus on strategy, product, and kind of business aspects of building the company.
Cool. Orion, what about yourself?
Yeah, my name's Ryan. I'm the lead protocol engineer at Squads now, so I work on all the protocol related things. So whether it be the new V4 upgrades or new protocols that we're developing, like P5. So anything protocol related basically is my domain.
Okay, sounds good. How would you introduce squads to someone that has no idea what squads is?
That would heavily depend on sort of how much context on the broader crypto space the person has. When we talk about squads to sort of new people, we usually start by outlining that there is a protocol that acts as sort of a foundation for everything we do. The protocol allows to create programmable on-chain accounts on Solana and SVM. And then on top of the protocol, we have the Squads app, which is an enterprise application for teams, institutions, and businesses to run their business operations on chain. And then there's Fuse, which is a consumer wallet on top of the protocol that allows individuals to securely store value on chain. And then kind of over time, our goal with Fuse is to allow them to manage a lot more aspects of their personal financial life without relying on sort of centralized vendors.
Sounds good. So, is it fair to say that squads and Fuse share the same infrastructure in a sense, but they targeted at different like market segments?
Yeah, exactly right. So I think Squads is on the enterprise side and Fuse on the consumer, but they leverage exactly sort of the same primitive under the hood, which is sort of the smart account deployed from Squads protocol that powered by the same on-chain program as it stands today.
Sounds good. Is security important for squads?
Yes, absolutely. I mean that's something we discovered um, about 6 months into starting the company. We realized that kind of our original focus with early versions of squads, where we thought, product is kind of the most important part of it. We quickly started talking to sort of different teams and developers in those early days on Solana, and none of them cared about sort of the shiny product experience. Everybody cared about how many times was this audited, who audited it, is it formally verified, is the code base small enough to for them to be able to even like review it themselves. And so we quickly became, very much security centric, and we try to keep, minimal code base. We try to audit it multiple times, and then at some point we discovered the beauty of formal verification, and now we also formally verify all of our code.
Sounds good. So, why did you guys choose to build on Solana in the first place?
Um, I would say there wasn't a process where anybody was choosing anything, right? Me and my co-founder Danny, we didn't sort of look holistically at the crypto space and we're like, all right, let's build on Solana. It was 2021. Solana had some sort of amazing vibes at the time. A lot of new developers were coming in. Me and Danny, we were non-technical, and so we joined the Solana Hackathon formation chat, and the whole chat was like, "Hey, I'm a full stack developer. Hey, I'm an Android developer." And we're like, well, me and Danny haven't met a developer in our life before, and so and then there was a group chat with all the developers. And so it was natural, the vibes were great. And then there were tons of people who were interested to build on Solana. And so that was kind of what kicked off our journey. At the time, the sort of product idea was slightly different and a lot of things were different back then. But then by the time that we sort of solidified, our vision for what we want to do with the company and what kind of protocol we want to build and what kind of products we want to deliver, there was never a choice. We just always wanted to stay on Solana and never considered anything else.
What do you make? What do you think make the vibes in the Solana community so special?
Look, I think a lot of people maybe might disagree with me in the sense that not everybody thinks it's a good thing, but from my perspective, and I think like the last Breakpoint conference also kind of highlights that, where Solana people and sort of builders who come to Solana and the companies that are being built here are much more business oriented. Even like I like to think of Squads Labs as a company that's building a protocol, building a bunch of products. I think in other ecosystems you can people think in terms of projects and kind of it's a slightly different I think approach to how you want to build a business on top of blockchains. And so I think that kind of nature is very appealing to us because we're actually trying to build something that is a business and that a lot of people find value in. And so that was kind of one aspect, but at the same time, just I think sort of Solana builders are very direct. They like to sort of chew glass, and it was very kind of inviting from the early days, where basically anybody could talk to anybody and you're sort of one DM away. And so I think that together really attracted us in the early days in 2021.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, Breakpoint was very special. The momentum is definitely on the Solana side, I think, these days, but of course I'm a little biased as well. Okay, so maybe let's talk about the audit that you guys did with us, Certora. Can you share like any specific insights or, so first, like what were the main area of concerns and focus that you came to us with for this specific audit?
Yeah, I guess I'll take this one over. So I think the three kind of core features that we introduced were out of squad spending limits, so enabling spending limits that can occur from outside of a squad, so not necessarily bound to a member. A new feature that lets you kind of upload transactions in slices, that we internally called like a transaction buffer, and then a bump allocator, a custom bump allocator that we implemented to allow us to use more heap in the Solana runtime. And so I think those were the three core features that we introduced. And so those were kind of the core subject of the audit. I think the transaction buffer and the allocator were definitely more important because they're bigger features. And specifically, the allocator obviously is kind of crucial. And so formal verification of that was kind of very crucial as well.
Sounds good. And did the audit uncover like some specific insights or vulnerabilities that during the process? What did you learn from the audit generally?
Yeah, you guys found some cool DOS like denial of service bugs and scenarios on the transaction buffer. So scenarios where somebody would, if you let's say had like a malicious member of the squad, in the case that that occurs, they would be able to kind of stop you from uploading a buffer per se. And another scenario where the buffer account, kind of the rent couldn't be reclaimed in a certain scenario. And so they're obviously kind of not vulnerabilities, but they're findings that kind of decrease the, let's say, potential usability of the protocol. And so those were neat to uncover.
Okay, okay. What about formal verification exactly? Like what expectation did you come into the audit with regarding formal verification, and why did you think that would be a plus to an audit?
I think I think well, we can split it into two sections. I think one is the kind of core consensus mechanism behind squads and kind of the properties of the audits that we have had done with you guys from before, where we've kind of come up with a set of core properties that we want to enforce and make sure that they're valid across both consensus, proposal lifetimes, transaction lifetimes, etc. Something like, a proposal can't be executed twice. Very simple things like that. I think that's kind of the most important section is maintaining that that's formally verified, that that behavior is kind of locked in. And then newly is the bump allocator, which, if I am not wrong, had the two properties of memory can never alias and memory can't ever be accessed outside of the bounds of the allocated addresses. And so having those verified is great, because that's kind of those are the two core properties that we need from the bump allocator. And so being able to verify those is good.
Interesting. Do you see a lot of projects in Solana being interested in formal verification besides squads? It feels to me like formal verification is taken more seriously on the Solana ecosystem. But what's your take on this?
I think maybe I can do a quick sort of non-technical comment on my side. I think it's there's a lot more interest and there's a lot more demand to formally verify code on Solana. The problem is that We are sort of as Squads protocol, we're in this kind of unique place where most of our on-chain code is static and very rarely upgraded and rarely touched. So we can afford to, have regular formal verifications because we rarely touch the program. If you're a massive DeFi protocol, which has, a lot of moving parts that need to be adjusted sort of on a, weekly or monthly basis, it just is not sustainable, right? To sort of continue formally verifying it every time. And so I think as more protocols on Solana get closer to sort of their more mature state, or their sort of V1s and V2s become more stable, and they move on to the next versions, and they want to kind of freeze or sort of solidify the current ones. I think that's kind of why we're seeing more interest in formal verification, because this kind of maturity of the DeFi ecosystem is coming. But it's still, I would say, pretty early days, and we always try to sort of talk to all our customers and nudge them towards, talking to you guys and getting at least, some properties formally verified. They know that are sort of going to be sort of stable and not changing. But yeah, I think it's definitely on the rise, but we're also trying to do our part to get more Solana code bases formally verified.
Yeah, which is awesome. Okay, and like looking ahead a little bit, how do you plan on maintaining security for future versions of squads?
Well, I mean, we sort of have a playbook at this point where we have 3 or 4 sort of firms we work with. For every sort of change to the program, we have multiple audits. We have formal verification with you guys and formal verification with OtterSec. So doing 2 independently as well. And I think for V4, we're hopefully done and we're moving to immutability very soon. And for V5, we'll sort of do the playbook again, work with you guys on the audit and formal verification. We'll get Neodime OtterSec to do the same. And so far, that's been sort of the strategy that worked really well for us. For V4, we actually had more than 3 auditors. I think we had 5 in total in terms of like independent auditors looking at the program. For V5, maybe also sort of to match the version number, we'll also get 5, but we'll see. At least 3 would be the minimum.
I see. What is the process of selecting auditors from your side? Like, is it difficult? How do you vet auditors typically?
Well, I would say depending on if we're looking for sort of just a regular security audit versus if we're looking for formal verification, those are different sort of tasks. On formal verification, nobody outside of sort of Certora on a more broad sense, and then OtterSec does it for in some aspects, and for some specific protocols, they can't really, I guess, work with everybody. They are the only 2 options, and we're super happy to sort of work with both. And sort of Certora in our minds is sort of the leader in informal verification, and gives us a lot of comfort there. In terms of all the other auditors, those are the firms that I mentioned. We sort of worked with them before, and we've had good experience. But also, they kind of have been through sort of the all the years starting from 2021 in the
Mm-hmm.
Solana ecosystem, and they looked at a lot of Solana code bases and been around. Sort of OtterSec and Neodime definitely are one of these sort of older firms. And then, at some point, for example, for the previous version, we also tried to find a firm that's less familiar with Solana, and actually for whom it would be kind of, first principles experience, where they have to think, understand even some of the like Solana aspects and how they work. Because we also want to have this kind of diversity of opinion. And so I think usually it's, history, references, the actual offering, and then yeah, sometimes if we want to diversify, we're bringing in some of the firms from outside of the ecosystem.
Okay, that's interesting. So, as like a general tip for other companies looking for audits, you would say it's good to look at the portfolio of an auditor and see how much experience they have in that particular ecosystem, right? That would be one tip you would give those teams. Anything else?
Yeah, I would say, sort of past experience, what kind of companies they worked with, reach out to those companies and ask them, how was the experience in terms of quality findings. And you can really find out a lot if you do like even light DD and just talk to, 3 or 4 companies that have been audited by the firm.
Mm.
And then, if they have a public presence, if they write blog posts, always, a good sign, and always good to read them and see how deep they go, and, how they try to present themselves. That also helps. not the main factor, but definitely an important one to look at. And then, yeah, I think it's also just get on a call with them and talk to them, right? Like, how are they thinking about the process and, maybe how they're thinking about your project, what kind of estimates they give you in terms of timelines and things they might find difficult. So definitely do your DD on them. I mean, it can be hard because a lot of the auditors are, really busy and sometimes you kind of have to fight for their attention. But that shouldn't kind of mean that you can't really do due diligence. Even if you're fighting for a slot, you should still DD and figure out, if they're actually a good fit for you.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. In terms of communication during the project, like how was your experience communicating with us at Certora, but also generally, like how do you like to be your communication during any particular audit?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it was really nice. I assume this is my first audit or with you guys from a squad's perspective, somewhat of a new employee, but I think especially when using and having audits done by multiple kind of organizations, it's kind of occasionally tough to have to balance it all because you'll have little
Mm,
nits or things coming in from different auditing companies. So like, we had a simultaneous audit with OtterSec, and so just the flexibility was amazing to be able to kind of push things that weren't necessarily related to fixes or nits that you guys found and just say, okay, OtterSec wants us to change this. We can merge it in, and having both kind of auditing companies on the same commit as you go along, especially that we're kind of moving towards immutability now. We really wanted to have all three auditors kind of at the same hash at the end of the day
mhm.
to say, okay, here's the final sign off on the commits. And so, yeah, it was great. It's really nice.
Okay, perfect. Happy to hear that. Okay, so Stepan, you mentioned V5. Is there anything you can share at this point or tease, or like what's the status of this project?
Well, yeah, I'll let Orion also comment because he's leading development on that.
Nice.
Yeah, we actually announced it at Breakpoint, so there's a bunch of stuff that's public. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, I think the core kind of upgrade over V4 that V5 is going to carry is kind of just more of a leaning into like single player experiences. I think Squads app, or specifically V4, is very much centered around organization, portfolio management, treasury management, et cetera, right? A lot of big protocols with a lot of signers. Or even occasional DAO management. But as a single person, kind of, if you have your own portfolio or if you have your own wallet and you want to secure your funds beyond just like a regular, like a cold wallet or like a ledger, um, it's a little bit it's a little bit cumbersome to have all of these kind of like async processes that Squad V4 is designed for, which is that it's designed to essentially save state to the chain, and then you can asynchronously consent on it and then execute it. But if you have all the keys in one place, it's kind of there's a lot of extra overhead that has to happen. And so V5 is just going to lean into kind of single player experiences, so synchronous execution of transactions with all signatures present kind of at the same time, kind of like in the direction that Safe has
Hmm.
ish, right? Where you kind of sign the same payload effectively and then execute it. Um, and then some other performance related fixes to make kind of V5 as efficient as can be. So that like people that want to execute things in squads don't have, a high restriction on what they can execute. Because obviously we're wrapping everything. And so um, some ecosystem transactions with protocols that are quite heavy, you ideally want the wrapper overhead to be quite small, namely for memory and compute usage. So those are probably the two biggest pillars that V5 is leaning into.
Okay, sounds good. So we've been talking about squads and Fuse, and roughly squads would be the more enterprise focused projects. Fuse more retail focused. I think that's a fair way to present them. What would you tell someone that just start in Solana? Why do people need a solution like Fuse or squads?
Yes, I think from starting with Fuse, the main idea or that it allows you to have a secure 2 out of 3 multi-sig setup that you can use personally, because it's sort of customary for very crypto sort of savvy users to have a multi-sig on Safe or on Squads. They have 2 ledgers and a Phantom wallet,
Hmm.
2 out of 3 threshold. But obviously, if we're trying to really scale security, which we are trying to do with smart accounts, and that's kind of one of the purposes of Squads protocol, we had to sort of come up with a better product experience to actually facilitate that. And so that's what Fuse is, right? You go through a couple clicks on your phone, deploy a multisig with 2 out of 3. one key is stored on device, the other one on iCloud, and third one used for recovery, which can be your email or any public key that you insert. And then you can upgrade the cloud key to be a ledger, and we're supporting more hardware vendors pretty soon. And so I think that would be my main pitch to anyone that's like who's already in crypto, that you use Ledger, that's great. You use Phantom, that's great. This is kind of the, if Ledger is cold wallet, Phantom is hot wallet, this is sort of the smart wallet, right? Where you can get the programmability and security of a smart account, but in a convenient way of it just being a mobile app. So that would be sort of the current state of things. And then as we sort of progress, we announced Fuse Pay at Breakpoint, which will be a debit card issued and attached to the wallet balance. And we already have sort of Fuse Earn, which basically allows you to have DeFi yield natively integrated into the app. And there's a lot more things coming with an idea that Fuse should be sort of an equivalent of your bank account on chain, where you can get DeFi yield, TradFi yield, you can trade, you can stake, you can spend, right? And so trying to kind of cover as much ground as possible for somebody who's considering to moving their personal financial life on chain.
That's great. And so going back to the card on top of Fuse, will you need to like sign any transaction you want to do with the card, or you define different spending policies? How does it work exactly?
So the way it works is that when you sign up for Fuse Pay, a second smart account is deployed where your main smart account of your Fuse wallet is a one-of-one signer. So that would be, so your main account is the only signer. And there's a time lock imposed on the card account for a couple minutes. And then there's an external spending limit in favor of the card enabler. And so the way it would work, you fund, and then you sort of control the spending limits of that the enabler can use. So you fund the card account from your main account. At that point, you set the spending limit. And then if you go around and sort of spend your assets with the card, the enabler uses the spending limit to pull the funds from your card account. You can remove the spending limit at any time or move the funds out. But if you have a pending time lock transaction to remove the funds out from the card account back to the main account, the card will not work, because the whole purpose of this architecture is to keep it self-custodial, where you as a user fully control your money because you control the spending limit. You can actually send it out at any moment, but prevents you from basically double spending, right? And spending with a card at the same time is like moving your assets out. And so that's the architecture we're working towards and planning to launch by end of year.
Okay, that's really cool. So I used to work at Ledger. I know for a fact that people are. It's difficult to secure private keys well. Do you have any tips for Fuse and Squad's user on best practices to use the products?
Yeah, so again, very depends on sort of the user profile, right? I think from the benefit you get with smart accounts broadly is that the single point of failure factor is removed. So the security of a specific seed phrase doesn't mean the security of all of your assets, because with smart accounts, the assets are in a programmable on-chain account. You can rotate keys at any moment. You can have multiple keys, and you can program a lot more sort of logic around it. So that's sort of a big caveat, that using smart accounts actually means it gives you more flexibility in terms of sort of security practices. For sort of on the Squad side, the list of guidelines is endless. If you want to be really secure, there's definitely a lot of things that you can do. But for sort of larger teams, we advise to have higher thresholds, impose time locks on all transactions. In some cases, we connect our users with custodial recovery vendors who can help you diversify the sort of the signers on the account and hold one or two keys and provide you recovery services if something happens. And so, and then after sort of the recent events where there was a sort of malicious injection on a device on sort of one of the protocols on the EVM side, we're also now advising everybody to have dedicated signing devices, a kind of mix of mobile and desktop, where you don't use it for general purposes. You only use it, this phone for signing multi-sig transactions to sort of minimize the chance of something being sort of maliciously injected there. And yeah, and then we obviously advise everybody to use a mix of hardware wallets from sort of different vendors and try to diversify sort of reliance on a single vendor as much as possible.
Okay. And the idea being that if like a malicious firmware update were to happen, or like a firmware would break the device, then you don't depend on the device that might potentially be compromised or break, right?
Correct. Yeah. Or some, yes, or some sort of supply chain attack that
Mm.
that we just sort of can't protect against, right? And so yeah, that's also what, Anatoly talks about publicly a lot, is sort of a mix of Ledger, Keystone, and Trezor.
Mm.
And for sort of personal custody with two out of three is sort of the most secure paranoid setup, which we agree with and respect.
Sounds good. Maybe last question. What does Fuse present any specific technical challenge developing that app that Squads doesn't present, or maybe the other way around?
I think from a sort of technical standpoint, it's just Fuse is a very opinionated product, right? Like the thing that's easier with Squads is that this is sort of a big enterprise app. We have pretty much, endless real estate to add more things, add more notifications, add more features and tabs and buttons. Fuse obviously has much less real estate because it's mobile first. And so a lot of the thinking on the sort of product side was, how do we find this sort of perfect recipe of what you actually need to have within the wallet? Particularly that kind of one of the core pillars of Fuse is that, and as an average user coming on chain, you need sort of 5% of apps for 95% of use cases. And so that curation is sort of an everything, right? Like how do we find this a sort of perfect fit of what needs to be in the wallet? And then sort of on the technical side, it was, learning curve for, because we haven't built, native mobile app before. And so definitely was a learning curve for the team. We also, had Vova come in and join us, who ended up sort of really spearheading this and leading. And so definitely, adjusting to mobile was interesting. And now we're also exploring to build a native mobile app for Squads, which would be used purely for signing and transaction verification, just to have, this additional sort of front end that's sort of locally installed on your device, to make sure that you know exactly what you're signing when you're interacting with Squads. So I guess Fuse helped us to kind of open the door to more mobile presence.
Yeah, sounds good. And I guess we should mention the Seeker device that was announced at Breakpoint as well. What do you think of that direction that the Solana community is going on?
Yeah, I think the sort of I think the Solana mobile efforts, and I think the sort of the next version, I think it's great, and we're definitely huge fans of the team there, and we think this is sort of a necessary push
Mm.
in the hardware space, and it definitely helps. I think to nudge sort of the bigger players at the same time as providing a viable alternative for guys like us who are building on Solana, and sort of we want to have diversity of sort of devices and also signing devices. I think we definitely sort of plan to support in some shape or form, sort of Seeker, be it with Squads or Fuse. We still have to decide. I think it's more likely that there will be sort of a version of Fuse that is going to be on Solana Mobile. But overall, yeah, we're super excited for everything that has come out from Solana Mobile so far, and definitely looking forward to them launching the phone.
Okay, sounds good. Well, that was the last question. Thank you very much for your time, both of you. And yeah, you can follow Squads at Squads Protocol on X, and Certora at Certora INC. Thank you so much again, and good luck with Squads and Fuse.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.